Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if we could get started, please. Good morning and welcome, everyone. We would like to respectfully acknowledge that Quispamsis exists on the traditional territories of the Wolastoqey, Maliseet, Mi'kmaq, and Maliseet tribes, along with the Passamaquoddy tribes, who signed a peace and friendship treaty with the British Crown in the 1700s. We would like to take a moment to pay respect to the elders, past and present, and the descendants of this traditional territory. I'd like to let the record show that all members are present today. Director McKenzie has to leave at 10:30. He's wearing 6 hats this week. And also that Director Merrifield has to step out at approximately 11:30, I believe. May I have an approval of the minutes, please? And I'd also like to ask that we include in that information from the closed session. So moved by Director McKenzie, seconded by Director Bedford, and those other additions are the inflationary increase and the appointment of Cindy Roadway. On the question, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Looking for a disclosure of interest. Seeing there are none. The item number 6, consent, building and planning update. Do I have a motion? Moved by Director Grant for receive and file, seconded by Director Doucette. On the question, all those in favor? Motion carried unanimously. Item number 7. I should have asked this earlier. If we could move, should we move the transportation upward? Because you have to leave, Director Merrifield, I'd like to move you up now, if we could, if that's okay with the mover and the seconder of the approval of business. We're okay with that. So I'm going to ask for Director Merrifield to give us an update on the regional transportation, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Regional Transportation Committee has entered in a partnership with Dr. Julia Woodhull-Melnick and her students at UMBSJ to conduct a community survey regarding regional transportation needs and challenges. In January, committee members and other community stakeholders participated in a focus group to help guide the development of the survey. The committee reviewed a draft of the survey before it was launched on March 20th. The survey is available at fundyregion.ca/transportation, and students are collecting in-person responses at locations across the region, including seniors' homes, gas stations, and grocery stores. The survey is being advertised through social media, and over 1,000 printed business cards that are being distributed by students. And we have, Nick has a bunch here for us today that we can take ourselves, or we can also take back to our town offices or other points that you think would be good for distribution. The project has also received media coverage from both CBC Radio and Acadia Broadcasting through CHSJ, The Wave, etc. After just 5 days, the survey has received over 750 responses, and it closes April 12th. So that's pretty robust response already. The committee has reviewed key principles for the FRSC's application to Infrastructure Canada's Rural Transportation Transit Services Solutions Fund Planning and Design Stream, which was then approved by the FRSC board at the February meeting. This year, the Regional Transportation Committee and the Public Safety Committee will establish a new rail traffic and safety subcommittee because there are a lot of intersections between the work of those two committees in that space. Transportation Committee member Tim O'Reilly has provided extensive background information to both committees regarding the existing regulatory environment and challenges as freight traffic ramps up across the region. And so next, terms of reference will be reviewed by both committees and members appointed. And on behalf of the FRSC, I would like to thank our committee members for their time, knowledge, and passion: Doug Scott, Genevieve Swigard, John Taylor, Tim O'Reilly, Chris White, Mike Rosehart, Jeff Sear, and Vice Chair Mike Bigger. And again, those business cards for the survey, Nick has them here for us to distribute it as we will. If anybody has any questions, Nick or I are available to answer.
Director Doucette.
Yeah, just a comment. We've shared that many times, and I've done it myself, and I appreciate the work that was done on that. It's good to get that out, and I think there's quite a bit, obviously there is quite a bit of interest, so get that input. It's good. I appreciate the work done. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Doucette.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you, Director Merrifield. Certainly, it's a demonstration of the collaboration between the regional partners and how important the work is that we are now doing under this new mandate through the reform. And we take this very seriously. And as you could hear from Director Merrifield, this all goes hand in hand with us collaborating and making our region better. So thank you for the work that you're doing. Now we'll have CEO Phil Willett with an update.
Through Chair O'Hara to members of the board, just a couple updates. First update is actually just related to past Chair Merrifield's update. We've received feedback that it's important to have regular communication from the committees to the board. And concurrently, we've also received feedback of make our lives simpler. Don't give us as much work. So the approach that my mind went to as a public servant is usually, hey, we should draft more reports and we should get people to write more reports. And my staff quickly identified that that is not going to make things easier. So as part of this, what we've decided to do is let's just stick with verbal updates. Let's have the chairs of the committees come in on a periodic basis and provide these verbal updates. We'll provide those verbal updates and notes and whatnot for the chairs, and that will be the approach of kind of this regular periodic update. If you want a robust one, you will have tons of fun with our very thorough annual report. You can print it off, you can have it by your coffee table or your nightstand, and that will be where you can get the really detailed information on how things are going and updates. So I hope that works for everybody. It's a little bit of a compromise. You won't know everything that happens, but that update will be provided, and we'll make sure those updates provide the kind of most notable points for the board's interest. And of course, if there's anything happening at a committee that is substantive, we would proactively bring it forward as a separate item, not just as an update. So please be aware of that. I think I have a quick comment from Director Merrifield.
Thank you to the CAO through the chair. Phil, my question has to do if people want a more robust report. Should we not be, like we do at the town with PAC minutes and other minutes for committees of council, and maybe we're already doing this and I've already missed it, should we not be including those in a consent agenda?
Through you, we do publish our minutes. We do have minutes for the committees, and at this stage, do we publish them online? We don't publish them online. It's something, if we have them, I don't see any reason why we couldn't do that. So okay.
And that might be a vehicle by which people can update themselves more thoroughly on the work of each of the committees. But that would be a suggestion I would make.
Yeah, good point.
Thanks.
And just to your point, Director Merrifield, I've had the same question from members of council here that they would like to go online every now and then and check the minutes from various committees. So that's something perhaps that we should consider or at least discuss a little further. Thank you for bringing that up. So
that was it for that quick update. The next one, very interesting, is about taking minutes, is my next update. And that update is because this is the first meeting that we are doing what we committed to in a past resolution, which is that we're taking our minutes a little bit differently. We're going to be streamlining our open minutes. You'll be just getting the core pieces in those written form of minutes. But now we are recording information that happens in the audio of these, and we intend to publish them on our website. And this is both as an attempt to simplify our workflows, become more efficient, but it's also a contribution to our ability to be transparent as well. So just to let you know, today is our first effort on this. If we mess up along the way, we will get better, but this is our first one. The other thing we wanted to make you aware of is the solar eclipse that is happening on March 8th. We have made a decision to reduce the hours at the landfill during the solar eclipse. There's a lot of reasons for that. We are not a landfill that can operate at nighttime. We don't operate at nighttime at the cell area, and we also have a very challenging time of preventing any employees or members of the public to have full access to the solar eclipse when it's occurring, once they're on top of the cell. So we made the decision that it's the best thing to prevent the risk. We've informed the public through social media, through our website, and other terms. So everybody should be aware of this, but want to make sure you're all aware of it as well. We've informed your chief administrative officers and rural district manager in case this impacts any interactions that were planned for that particular day in terms of garbage distribution collection. So just want to make sure you're aware of that. Also want to give you a quick update on the Aquatic Center Enhancement Study. As you are aware, this is an active project that we have, and it is to examine what types of upgrades the Aquatic Center could receive in order to successfully host the Canada Games in the future. This project is roughly 50% complete now. A lot of public engagement, stakeholder engagement has occurred so far. No specific design of facility upgrades or cost estimates have been generated at this stage. But ultimately, for the board's purpose, what's important for you to be aware of is this will certainly inform a potential for future investment into that facility. It will be presented to the Regional Facilities Committee, the body that is most appropriate to receive those and to deliberate. But if there was a desire to proceed with recommendations from that study, it would eventually come back to this body for discussion and consideration. The idea is to get all this done, and it was done intentionally for this, for budget 2025. So we expect this to be completed by early June, which would give us sufficient time to build that into budget assumptions or any other concepts. So a lot to discuss here. It'll be a big, robust discussion once it arrives. Want to make sure you're all aware of it. Lastly, I want to share some news on human resources. I did want to let you know that we have successfully hired a contract position for development officer role, and we'll be sending an email shortly with the details of that new temporary employee. These are funding through the province of New Brunswick that allowed for that to occur. I also, we are kind of finalizing in the last stages of finalizing the hiring for a director of planning as well, which is a permanent full-time role within the commission, and excited to share some news on that once I can. Lastly, I have also recently received the news that one of our employees is leaving. They've accepted a new role with a very reputable organization in our community called Envision St. John. Nick Cameron, who's been with the FRSC for 7 years now, has accepted a new role with Envision St. John, we're very happy for Nick in this new adventure he's going to dive in. It's bittersweet because we are saddened to see him go, but we're quite happy that he's still in the family, if we can use that term. And we're very happy for Envision St. John to have his skill set as well. So as is the case with anybody in the FRSC, Nick wears many hats, and he's wearing one right now. And what our next steps here is to make sure that this transition is as flawless as possible. So Nick and I have multiple meetings already behind us and in front of us to make sure that all these responsibilities that he'd taken on are going to be transferred. So don't have all the answers right now, but we are both very confident that we'll have a really strong strategy in place, and we'll see minimal disruption to the work plan, to the committee, and to our planning service as a result of Nick's departure. So I'll take this opportunity to thank Nick officially for all the great work he's offered to the commission, and wish him absolute the best of luck in his new role with Envision St. John. And that's it for my verbal update.
Thank you, and I'll add that to that. Nick, thanks so much for your insight and your vision, and certainly for all the contributions that you've made over the past 7 years of your tenure with the RSC. It's certainly valuable, and we look forward to hearing more from you when you work alongside Envision, and I'm sure we'll be in plenty of communication with you. So we do look forward to hearing back from you. I always, as the CEO says, it's always bittersweet when we lose someone, but I've gone through many losses here at the town office, and I have to say, we've been very fortunate to have good people working for us, and I only wish them well. And to you and your family, I wish you all the success. Thank you. Director Merrifield.
Thank you. I'd like to echo the chair's statement. And as chair of the Regional Transportation Committee, I think it's fair to say we will all miss you very deeply. And we're very thankful for the work that you've done to move the work of that committee forward, and the passion that you have and the depth of knowledge that you have in that sphere. So very thankful that we'll still be seeing you with Envision, but a bit of a loss for us at the committee. And thank you for all your work.
Thank you. I'm going to go now to item number 8, CMEI Community Project Grants.
Is there, are we able to pull the projects up, or we may not need them? Okay. Madam Chair, thank you very much. This year, as in every year, we allocate a portion of our tip fee over to community grants projects as part of the original order in council to operate the landfill where we operate now. And this year that amount was $97,588, I believe, allocated to the community. We have concurrently, we have an agreement with our watchdog group who we separately fund. In the contract with them, they also do a process of evaluating and recommending community grant projects for us. So they handle the whole application process, the whole assessment. And so today I have Michelle Lodge and Lori Nason with me, who are from the committee from CMEI. And a few years ago, we implemented a scorecard system with CMEI just to make things a little more numerical. And in your package, you should see a list of those projects and the rankings of which they were assigned priority after the scoring process. I think, I'm going to guess, but I think Lori and Michelle can say it was quite a robust discussion, maybe. So I did send them back to reassess some of the projects and have a deeper discussion. But at the end of the day, we've come forward with the original recommendation, which I will attest to was fair and for robust. So I'm recommending to the commission that we. Sorry. Oh, yeah. Am I not talking loud enough? That's the first. it's very technical here. um, geez, where was I now? It's always the tap. Yeah, that's it. So anyway, at the end of the day, the list in front of you is what's being recommended. I will attest that the process was fair and robust, and very pleased with the discussion we have. So I'm recommending that we accept the host community projects as presented by CMEI for an amount up to $97,588 in 2024, as is our annual practice.
Thank you. And before I interrupted you, it was that you had a report card that you were able to do a checklist now for applicants. So I don't know if you wanted to say
In my
anything
brain
further.
somewhere, I don't know
Okay.
where that went. But it basically it's as presented. So the only reason this isn't in the consent agenda is that there was, and I referred to it in the report, there was a bit of a contrast with a project that we had supported through an easement agreement. However, after reviewing the process, I still think the process was fair. So we're going with the recommendation as presented.
Thank you very much, Mr. McLeod. May I have a motion or discussion, please? Moved by Director Merrifield, seconded by Director Bedford. On the question. Director McKenzie, please. No? Director Waddell.
Really appreciate what the committee does, the hard work they do to assess these. But there was some discussion at past meetings about the emphasis on government subsidies, subsidizing the provincial government education system by providing money to the schools at the expense of NGOs and people like the Scouts and KBM in the community. And so I noticed that the schools this year have around 35,000 of the 97, or about 35% of the money that is available to go to the community, whereas in the past it's been 18, 19%. So it seems to be creeping up, and I don't know how to address this, but I'd like to have the CMEI and FRSC get into discussions about whether we should be subsidizing the schools, the province, at the expense of the NGOs and the community organizations in the host area. I guess it's that hasn't been expanded, but it's in that area. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Director Riddell. Would you like to
Sure, Madam Chair.
respond?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, it's a great question. And again, I'll go back to Michelle and Lori. I think this was one of the hot topics that we had a discussion as well. But and one of the components of in our discussions, we did talk about it has been 5 years basically since we've had our scorecard, or will be. And since it was originally developed, so we've had it in practice for about 4 years, I think. And one of the things was, maybe it's time for a refresh. But this topic was, one of the ones that was brought up about scorecarding and setting up a component. Questions like, smart boards and things like that, which are some of the approved projects. That was a hard and detailed discussion. But again, in the sense of the process and how it's set up now, it's acceptable. The other ones are things like one of the schools was asking for beach volleyball court or something like that, which must attest to the interests of the school. It's how the application seemed to suggest it anyway. And currently a program like that might not be normal curriculum or normal support from the Department of Education or the province. That's kind of how the process was followed through the scorecard system. That being said, I think we've had this discussion a number of times through my tenure here, but never any specific direction from the commission, because it was always felt that this really should be, at the end of the day, decided by the members of the community and the needs of the community, and sometimes that comes through the schools because not everything's funded. But willing to certainly go through and assess it again, because that's the intent of the committee next year. They would like to revise how the scorecard is done. And I said, yeah, we're more than, I mean, the scorecard can be anything at the end of the day, as long as the criteria are defined and clear. So, but that's where we're at right now.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Director Bedford. And Director Grants.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just curious, Mark, if you have a running total on how much this process has given to KBM over years. I've been sitting here for 10 years, and I think it's a significant amount, but I'm not sure.
So Michelle and Lori and I had talked about it, and I had the numbers to rattle right off of my head. Just one second. If you give me a moment, I will. I do have it. I'm guessing it's around 300,000, but
How much has been contributed to KBM over the past 10 years that Director Grant has been on board?
thank you, Madam Chair. Yes. So, in the sense of the community centers, we've given a total of 800, not including this package for 2024. We've given $299,230 to the KBM, $172,315 to the Martinon Community Center, and $394,810 to the River Valley Community Center. So it's around
very significant amounts.
It's significant, yeah. I think, and again, if we go to like the KBM, if we remember, there was a hiccup a few years ago, and we made them come back to us with a different operating plan to justify the future investment. So, and again, that process is captured through the scorecard system and the needs and interests of the community, like that. And we've always talked about, as a commission, trying to expand the opportunities. Certainly, are there any signature projects that we can spend more money on? Like, so the Blueberry Hill project was one of them. Doing upgrades on siding or bathrooms or kitchens and things. It's not signature, but it's certainly needed. And so, trying to balance those things off. I think that's what the scorecard does.
So did we get the new operating plan?
We did. Yeah, it was a few years ago now. Yeah.
I think I remember that. Well, with these very significant amounts, I hope these community centers are functioning as the community would have hoped that they would with these investments.
I think so, because, based on the discussions, especially with Michelle and Lori, I don't think they would be comfortable recommending more money to them if they didn't think they were getting value for dollar, because they're members of the community. So I'm quite confident that that's reflected through the scorecard. But again, I'll ensure that if we go through any changes, I'll ensure that it's part of that process, because there's no question. It's a tough balance, because we don't want to be seen as kind of automatic, where we're trying to support projects here and support the community. But at the same time, we want to see that the money's going to good things with a good plan. They're just not one-off ideas the day before the application deadline. And so, we try and work closely. I mean, even the River Valley Community Center, for instance, I mean, that holds the arena and everything like that. To run an arena, as we all know, which is a fun and touchy subject, it's expensive. So, you know, and I think, but it's great for the community and all those kind of things. So it's its own entity and it's supported in the town of Grand Bay Westfield. You know, you know, I think it's one of those things that, you know, we ought to support. So, but again, depending on the criteria, I suppose, developed by the scorecard, that would determine how much they would get. But right now, they get decent support, I think, from a fund that has grown over the years.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Grant. Director Merrifield, please.
Thank you. First of all, thank you to CMAI and all the work you do. It can't be easy to go through all of these asks and decide, you know, who's going to get what. I know that's not easy. I do want to echo Director Riddell's concern about subsidizing the provincial government. That is something that we really do need to look at. And I noticed that a lot of a good portion of the awardees were schools. And I'm a huge fan of our schools. We support our schools as much as possible. I do think we need to develop a policy on the type of money that we give to schools, and that the money should go to initiatives that are available for the greater community to use. It does look to me that we have provided money for curriculum materials. And that is something that is clearly within the mandate of the provincial government. They should be funding our schools to that extent. Municipalities and our ratepayers should not be funding schools to provide curriculum materials. So that is something that I really think we need to look at. You know, the outdoor sports parks and education areas. Those are things that our greater community can use, not just the schools. But I really don't think we should be giving money for smart boards and curriculum materials, that kind of thing. So I think that's really something that we need to look at, something that will enable our students to develop a relationship with the outdoor world in a way that they can't before, or experience nature and that the greater community can access, or have outdoor activities such as the outdoor volleyball. I do have an issue with classroom smart boards, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Merrifield. And I have to say, I'll leave the chair, Director Bedford, if you don't mind. I was going to speak to the exact same point. As a former teacher, I would think I'd died and gone to heaven if I thought there was an organization out there that was going to buy me a smart board or you know, give me some capital materials for my classroom. That is just unheard of. So as far as an outdoor gym that the public can use, or you know, volleyball courts or pickleball courts, that sort of thing, that the entire community can use, perhaps that's going to take a little bit of revamping to say that, you know, in our criteria, anything that's on the inside of the school must be paid by the provincial government. But I would,
and that's what, Madam Chair, or Mr. Chair, I would say that's what, you know, the discussion with CMEI was about, was just, you know, we recognize that there's not going to be a perfect system every time that we go. This year, you know, you have almost $300,000 or $260,000 in ask for $97,000 of availability, and everything is going to be hotly contested and debated. And some years it's the opposite. We're struggling to find eligible projects to use the money for. So establishing those exclusive criteria sometimes in the past hasn't been kind of the directive, but for the past few years, the asks have been big, and I think that the CMEI committee and in discussions with me, we recognize that we're going to have to develop some more robust criteria around the scorecard. And certainly we can have those, and I mean, we can assign, like, at the end of the day, the commission can assign any criteria we wish to assign. It's just the money has to go out, you know, the opportunity has to be there for it to go out to the commission. So certainly more than, you know, we can make it a little more formal from a commission perspective and go out and work with the CMEI group and come up with criteria. And if you guys want to give me specific directions about things we don't want to fund, I can ensure that those are not included. But at the end of the day, it's about, the discussions around the smart boards, for instance, was around, advantages and equalizing opportunity, older schools, getting them some later technology. Yes, the province should do it, but we can wait, or we can give the opportunity to the kids that are there now and not have them at a disadvantage. That was the discussion at the table. So certainly considered. But again, I'll stick by my original intent, which was the current projects are great, and I can take these concerns back, and we can come back with a recommendation on the scorecard at a later date, for sure. No problem.
Thank you. We certainly appreciate that, because I think that there does have to be a little more robust discussion about this, about providing this funding, the 97,588 for the entire community,
Yeah.
and certainly not supporting and bolstering the education system because it may be unfair to somebody that lives elsewhere. I think we have to point to the province to make sure that education is equal for all. And I see a light flash in Director Doucette.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just for clarification for myself, because I'm fairly new to this part, but this is projects that the commission is given to Grand Bay area.
It's defined under an order in council from the provincial government. It's from basically the beginning of South Bay in the city of St. John, down through to Westfield, to the flashing light.
And the flashing light.
It's as simple as that.
Everybody knows where that is.
Yeah, under the act, it says the town of Grand Bay Westfield, including the town of Grand Bay Westfield, but we had to get clarification with the expansion of local government, and the minister clarified that in February, that it's to the bridge where the original border
Right.
of the community was. So it's the host community in basically the downstream of the landfill.
Right.
Within those borders. So anyone in there can apply for funding. I also talked to CMEI as well about, not that we want to have too hard of a time, but as we develop stiffer criteria or more restrictive criteria or more opportune criteria perhaps, we really want to look at how do we promote this fund throughout the community so people do apply. And I looked at some of the older projects, this year, it would be a tough year for any organization, and the food bank in Grand Bay Westfield didn't apply for any funding. But I would think, that would have been a great thing for them to apply for the funding for something. So, we're trying, so it's not just about the scorecard, it's also about trying to get the fund out there. But yes, it's restricted to that border.
Yeah, so this has been going on a while, right?
Since inception.
Since inception,
The
I
fund
get it.
has been funded since 97. The project started in 98.
Okay. Well, that's a substantial amount of money.
Yeah, over 2 million this year or last year, I think it was. Yeah, last year, $2 million. So we're kind of up in the 2.2 million area now.
Okay. And I would agree with the taking the government off the hook on some of this stuff. That's in discussion in many meetings.
Can be said in truth, it could be said with almost any charity.
Yeah,
At the end of the day, you go to the hospital and say, hey, we want this.
Right. And we talked about that at other meetings, and it's good that we could do that, but I think the criteria needs to kind of eliminate some of that. I really think locally and for the smaller, they're great, but I think the helping with that provincial stuff it's bothersome to us. That we're kind of taking them off the hook. And I agree with the comments earlier.
I think Michelle and Lori would echo that. I brought this up at the meeting. But again, back to the process.
Yep.
It was fair and robust for what it is.
Thank you, Director Doucette. I'll go now to Director Riddell.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just going forward, I'm making an observation. A number of the asks from the schools are for sports and recreation equipment that could probably be better applied to a recreation association that works for the greater community and not just for the provincial government. So that might be an opportunity there for the school to liaise with the local recreation associations that exist in the community so that the greater community can benefit from the hockey nets as opposed to just the schools.
Yeah, I think, and that was, I think that's a great message. I think Director Merrifield had referred to that as well. And again, we do look at that as part of the current criteria. We look at projects that just aren't restricted to single user. The broader the use of the allocation of funds of the project, the higher the score, the higher that aspect of the scoring is in their current score, in this current scorecard. So that is considered.
Thank you, Director Riddell. Director Grant, please.
Yep.
Director Bedford, I'm sorry.
Mark, just for clarification for some of the members here, the formula to come up with the dollars and cents, is that equal to $1 per ton? Is that how that formula?
No. Yes and no. The original, it was based on the first day original estimate of what was going to come in 1997 on an annual basis. And so they said, okay, it's worth $1 on that. And that number was estimated to be 75,000 tons. So they used $75,000 as the baseline year. From that point on, that number has been adjusted for 1/2 of the consumer price index every year thereafter, compounded.
Yeah. One other question to add on to that, back about 6 years ago, before we did the scorecard, it was actually brought up, it was mentioned about the KBM, that this fund wasn't supposed to be basically their yearly operating budget, because every year there's a substantial amount of money that they're requesting, and they've been given quite a bit of money over the years. So that would be one concern that this, and I remember that they actually came in and gave us a budget on their fundraising that they had proposed. So hopefully they're carrying through with that fundraising so that they don't expect this kind of money to be their yearly operating budget.
Yeah, thank you for that question. You're right. And actually what happened was, it was worse than that. It was, of course, the fact that the group went bankrupt and lost their charitable status. And then they were able to gain that back and provide us with a plan so that there was still ownership and all those kind of fun things. And they gave us a working plan. And so you'll note that most of the projects are associated around supporting future events. That's been the main focus, and I believe, like for weddings and things, they sell out every year. That's anecdotal. I don't have that information in front of me, but that's the general understanding, is that it's the activity, they're charging more reasonable rates now, as opposed to, yeah, you can rent the hall for your wedding for $25 this weekend. It's more, more of the market value, and they've been able to generate revenue that way. So that being said, the majority of these things are just in the sense of enhancing the opportunity for those type of events.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Seeing there are no further questions or discussion, the motion is to approve the funding for host community projects as presented by CMEI up to the amount of $97,588 in 2024. Moved by Director Grant, seconded by Director Doucette. On the question. I thought it was moved. And who was it moved by, please?
It was moved by Director Merrifield and Director Bedford.
Perfect. On the question, thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And just as a point of order, the approval of the minutes, did we have a motion on that, Cassie?
I got a little confused. The approval of the order of business, I believe, was done, but I
Yes.
am unsure that the minutes were approved.
So could we have a motion on that, please, just to have that in our minutes? Moved by Director Riddell, seconded by Director Bedford. On the question, all those in favor? Motion carried. And once again, the MCBB bridge funding, Mark?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Normally, you would see this this fall under the consent agenda, and what you'll note in the report is that I'm asking for approval of bridge funding pending the ministerial order from MCBB, which we received yesterday. So we now have a ministerial order 24-0022 allowing us to borrow for environmental health services, basically for cell number 10, 5.9 million, and then equipment purchase for 1.14 million. And we're allowed now to go for temporary boring services, which is the bridge funding I'm requesting. So this is the motion to support the borrowing has already occurred. This isn't that. This is the motion to say, hey, you can get started on your projects, but you need to go get temporary funding. So that's what we're looking for today. So, Madam Chair, the motion would now read, if I can get this, to authorize a short-term bridge financing loan with the Imperial Bank of Commerce, who we deal with, in the amount of $7.014 million under a ministerial order. I'm trying to 24-0022 under the authority of ministerial order 24-0022.
Could we have a mover on that, please? Moved by Director Bedford, seconded by Director Grant on the question. I don't see any lights flashing. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Mark.
Chair, thank you very much. Phil, do you need me for anything else? Because I have another meeting, if I can.
Much, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks for being here. Thank you. Item number 10, presentations. 10A, 2029 Canada Games bid. And we have Mr. Beckett here, CEO of the Envision St. John. Welcome.
Morning, everybody. I'll try and be brief just to provide an update in terms of where things stand in terms of the discussions around the 2029 Canada Games. As you know, the province of New Brunswick is the designated province to host the Games in that year. That leaves the question as to where the Games will be from that standpoint. So just as a recap in terms of what the Canada Games are, they're the largest multi-sport event in Canada, about 4,600 participants in 17 to 20 sports. That number of sports varies because there are a number of host community options in terms of picking sports for the list. It's done over a 2-week period, about 18 days of competition associated with it, and requires a volunteer pool in the order of about 5,000 volunteers over the course of the 2 weeks. It's held every 2 years. There's 22 communities that have hosted the Canada Games, including St. John in 1985. And the Games represent athletes coming from approximately 700 communities across the country. In terms of the opportunity this creates for the local area, it's a chance to engage the city, the region, the province, and the nation in the celebration of amateur sport, and create some legacies within the region in terms of some of the facilities. We've seen that in our case with the Canada Games Stadium at UMBSJ, and also the Canada Games Aquatic Centre was as a result of the 1985 Games. I think the most immediate sort of consideration in terms of hosting is that there is a significant economic impact that comes from hosting the Canada Games. PEI did an extensive study on this most recently as part of hosting the 2023 Games, and estimated that the economic impact for the province was $212 million. And for the cities that hosted, Charlottetown and Summerside, that it was estimated at about $195 million. So a very significant economic impact associated with hosting the Games. More than that, though, too, it also, and we definitely saw this locally with the 85 Games, this type of event really elevates the pride in community. by having a large number of volunteers associated with the event, engaging the community in the different and various events that are taking place over the course of the 2 weeks. It brings a lot of civic pride with it, and that's got a long-standing sort of legacy associated with it. We also think it's a chance to encourage and inspire athletes in the region to participate in these types of events and to dream big in terms of their possibilities. By playing host, typically the host province has a larger contingent of athletes than some of the other areas would be, because it's less expensive to have their athletes participate. So it provides a broad range of opportunity from that standpoint. The bid committee that will engage. We've got a lot of gray hair associated with people that have been involved in hosting events in this region, and we do see this as an opportunity to engage the next generation of people that need to be involved in terms of these hosting these types of events. It takes a lot of work, a lot of committed community volunteers. We need to increase that pool so that going forward, we've got people that are able to support moving forward with these types of events. So we see a great opportunity to transfer some knowledge from people that do have an established track record in hosting these to other people coming on. And you considered, I know that Mr. Roulette gave an update earlier on in terms of the Canada Games Aquatic Centre. This is also an opportunity to get some investment into existing facilities to upgrade them and bring them up to today's standards, and investments that are likely needed anyway, but the Canada Games opens up other pools of money from the provincial and federal level to help in terms of the funding of some of those upgrades. It will also bring out more volunteers that will increase our pool of volunteers, and this community responds very, very well to the call for volunteers for these types of events, and so it'll be a great way to engage people from that standpoint. And these types of events bring a lot of visibility for the region in terms of visitors that come along with the athletes, but also different and various media coverages of the events. It's great for the local community to get to that type of visibility. In meetings with the province, and when the province announced did their kickoff for the Canada Games bid, they made it clear that the province has some objectives associated with hosting the 2029 Games. They wanted to make sure that it was fiscally prudent, done in a fiscally prudent manner through the entire Games life cycle, from bid to wrap up. Read between the lines on that, but what's been made directly to us, they were looking for partnerships. They wanted to make sure that this was done in a way that minimized the types of investments that were needed, and I think that's got a benefit to us in terms of, I think the underlying side of that was they didn't want to see another 50-meter swimming pool developed in the province. One is enough for a province our size. And so there was a hope that there would be some partnership opportunities that would go along with being fiscally prudent in terms of how we delivered the events. It also, they wanted to provide a legacy of the 29 Games that would be improved access to outdoor spaces, recreational facilities, programs, and services in the community and region where they're hosted. The Games would showcase the host community as a great place to live, work, study, and play. Again, there's a big tourism and basic community promotion associated with the event, and that we would align the planning and execution with the government of New Brunswick's climate change goals and action plan. Which brings us to then consideration of how we would go about hosting these. So we certainly, as a region, we've done the analysis of the assets that we've got in terms of our facilities and the like, and we feel that the St. John region could put forward a very credible bid. That we think the one area where we would have great concern is our ability to house 2,300 athletes per week for 2 weeks. We simply don't have a location for an athletes' village. UMB St. John has some residences, but not nearly enough to do that. And so again, looking for ways to minimize the type of capital investments that would be needed, that was a major concern from that standpoint. And again, the province had made it clear that partnerships were worth pursuing. We'd also had discussions with Moncton in particular because we think there's ongoing opportunities to work collaboratively around sport tourism and sport events that we think, for example, Moncton's had great success hosting, say, the World Juniors in partnership with Halifax. Well, why isn't that partnership St. John and Moncton and keep it in the province versus going over 2 provinces? So we think there's a lot of good opportunities to do some joint events with Moncton. By partnering with another region, and most notably Moncton is the one we've had the discussions with. It reduces the capital investment that's required because we would approach this from the standpoint of picking where sports are going to be held based on where existing facilities are present to be able to hold those events so that it doesn't require the addition of new facilities. It would share the financial risk, and I'll get into some of the finances associated with hosting the games, but it shares the financial risk associated with the operations over a broader area. I've mentioned the Athletes Village. By splitting across 2 areas, it means that the number of athletes that would be in each area would be less, and that eases the responsibilities in terms of having an Athletes Village. We would actually have 2. It increases the opportunities for sponsorship. By including a broader part of the province, it provides access to other companies, other businesses that we can approach for sponsorship associated with the games, and we think that'll be beneficial for the financial side. The bid process, and I think this is a significant one, both in terms of avoiding a win-lose and also timing, that if we do it on a collaborative basis, it avoids the bid process. And the bid process is almost a year, which it's underway now and concludes in January, February of next year. If there's an agreement that we're doing this in collaboration and that there's basically only one submission from the province of New Brunswick, then ourselves and the Canada Games Council enter into a collaborative process that starts being very focused on making the games the very best they can be. And so it basically adds a year to your opportunities for planning, and it avoids this win-lose scenario where one area of the province would win, the other area would lose, and gets everybody working together towards a common benefit for the province. On the con side of things, there will be some impact on operating costs hosting over 2 areas. We expect that it will add some costs to the operations. We don't think at this stage that they're significant, and we think that's more than offset by the increased sponsorship opportunities that are there. And also a concern when you look at it from the athlete's experience, there's no question the preference from Canada Games standpoint would be to have one athletes village. It creates that camaraderie amongst the athletes that they're looking for. We've had discussions with the Canada Games Council about this, and I think they recognize the reality that if they're truly going to be an event that's hosted across the country in all 10 provinces, 3 territories, that they have to look at some different ways to go about hosting the event, because there's very few areas that could accommodate hosting 2,300 or plus athletes on a weekly basis. So the discussions with Moncton have gone quite well over the last little while. To a point that I think, my friendly rooms here, that it's as of I think next week it will be made public that Moncton is approving the joint bid to go with St. John on a bid for the Canada Games, and I think that's a plus for the province from that standpoint to move in that direction. In terms of the finances associated with it. Provided a bit of an outline, a slide there that shows what the Canada Games typically provides in terms of this, in terms of $9 million in capital and $18 million in operating. The actual experience has been a bit different in that because those numbers aren't inflation adjusted. So in 2017, the operating costs were about $28 million. 21, they were 31.4, and in 25, they were 35.7. The expectation from the local council standpoint, the local municipality standpoint, is in the order of about, under the old numbers, it's about $3 million, inflation adjusted for 2029. It'll be somewhere in the order of $4 to $6 million. And again, if we're partnering with Moncton, that would be basically split 50-50. So you're looking at $2 to $3 million for the St. John region, $2 to $3 million for the Moncton region to host the games. In terms of the financial commitments, the host municipalities do have to agree to be responsible for any financial deficit associated with the games. So you are very reliant at the end of the day in terms of the volunteer committee that's put forward, in terms of doing fundraising, getting sponsorships in place that offset a significant portion of the operating costs. There are federal grants, provincial grants that go against the operating side that are agreed to, and there's also ticket sales associated with the events that help offset some of the costs. The history has been quite good in terms of covering those costs. In '85, it actually there was a surplus generated from the hosting of the games, and created the Canada Games Foundation that still continues to the present day in terms of funding amateur athletes. So what's called for in terms of a minimum is an agreement to contribute $3 million in cash to the host committee for capital expenditures. That will be more than taken care of, depending on what happens with the Canada Games Aquatic Centre. Would more than satisfy the requirements associated with it. We've taken a look at other facilities around the region that might be part of hosting some of the events. We think there's very minimal investments that are needed in a number of those facilities. We've had discussions with the city in particular because they have a number of the facilities that would be used, and a lot of the capital expenditures that have been identified are already in their plan over the next few years to do anyway, so that there was no concern raised from their standpoint in terms of investments that were required. Confirm any additional financial commitments in cash and in kind versus towards capital and operating. So that's the other opportunity that's here, working with the municipalities. There's a number of things that can be done in kind versus an actual cash contribution being done. And confirm that the first $25,000 of the rights fee of $270,000 will be paid by the municipal government upon award of the games. Total rights fee is $1.08 million. To be paid over 4 years. And again, that would be split between ourselves and Moncton on a 50-50 basis. I've provided some milestones associated with the process. And just before I jump to the milestones, in terms of our discussions with Moncton, the framework that we've basically agreed to, and we're working through the details now, is that it would be a 50-50 split. 50-50 in terms of number of athletes, male and female, that would be participants in the St. John region versus the Moncton region. And that the opening ceremonies would be in one location, closing ceremonies would be in the other. So that it creates a balance in terms of that. And so now we're working through the details in terms of what that translates into in terms of the various sports. And that's being done with the guiding principle is that we're assigning the sports to the location where the least amount of capital investment is required to host them. So in terms of our milestones, there was an official launch in Fredericton in January from the province's standpoint in terms of the hosting process. By the end of February, there was a requirement to submit a declaration of an intent to bid. Both Moncton and St. John submitted an intent to bid. It's non-binding. We made that clear before, we clarified that before it went in, so we have submitted an intent to bid. There's a technical submission and evaluation that has to be complete and ready for review by June. We're in the process of putting that together and working with Moncton in terms of putting that together so that we're ready for that. We have to advise the Canada Games Council, however, by the middle of April if it's going to be a joint bid, because it changes that whole process in terms of the capital, the technical review. So that's part of the reason why I'm here today, just to make sure that we've not got major concerns in terms of continuing down the path of working with Moncton on a joint bid for the games. And all of this leads through to hosting in August of 2029. But as I noted earlier on, instead of going through this process of a short list of communities that have to go through a submission, comprehensive bid submissions and evaluations that have to be submitted by January of 2025, the bid preparation process, if we were doing this on a competitive basis, we estimate to be about $1 million. Both communities avoid having to spend that money. By doing this on a collaborative basis, we just get right into the planning for the games. So that's the framework that we are. We're, like I said, we're ready, and both communities seem on track to proceed with a joint bid. We think this is positive for the region, for the province, and think it will provide a great opportunity for some significant benefits in both areas moving forward. With that, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to.
Thank you very much. A very thorough introduction to what hopefully will come to fruition. I will go now to Director Merrifield, please.
Thank you, Andrew. That was a great presentation. I like the idea of the collaboration. I do have a question regarding the governance of the committee. So when you say that municipalities are on the hook for any financial deficits, what controls or financial oversight would we have over the Games Committee and their expenditures? Because that does make me nervous.
Understandably so. There is the Canada Games have a fairly rigid structure that they follow. The host committee has to incorporate. And so it's an incorporated body. There would be regular updates provided to the municipal units in terms of their budgets and the process that they're going through for the development of the games. I can tell you already that we've already got a very good core of key people within communities that are coming forward to want to be part of that host committee. But there will be regular and ongoing reporting, and there is a very, very defined structure from the Canada Games side to protect from that standpoint based on past experience.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Merrifield. And Director Bedford, please.
Was that me? Yeah, thank you, Andrew. One quick question. What kind of timeline do you see that the municipalities will know what the cost will be? You know, whether it's the cost for improve the aquatic center, or our contribution to it. What kind of a timeline would that be?
I think there's two parts to that one. The first on the Canada Games Aquatic Center, working through the process that's currently underway, you're going to have a sense of the required investments that are needed in the Aquatic Center fairly soon. And I would say, I'd suggest a significant portion of that investment needs to be made anyway, whether we host the Canada Games or not. The facilities at that stage where it needs some upgrades to it, but you'll have that and Phil, I'm not sure the exact timing, but that'll be coming over the next few months. In terms of the actual operations for the games themselves, the committee and the organization that's set up associated with the games basically will be told there will be a fixed amount of municipal contribution. And again, it's got to be inflation adjusted. I think it's going to be somewhere in that $4 to $6 million spread over 2 to 3 years. That's what the host committee will be told. That's it. That is the municipal, and they have to work their budget. They have to work their planning on the basis that the municipal contribution is no more than that. And so that's and then as mentioned earlier on, then there'll be the regular reporting on an ongoing basis to ensure that they're meeting those budget objectives.
So that timeline then, my question basically will be somewhere early fall?
I think, again, because of the year that's been added, I think you're looking at sort of, I think you're looking probably about a year from now. Because we've got to get both communities have their representatives that are going to be part of the organizing committee, get that organizing committee properly structured in accordance with the Canada Games guidelines, get through the technical evaluation that's got to take place in June, give them some time to sort of develop their plans. So I would expect that sometime in the spring or in this time frame next year that we'll be ready to have them come back to the municipal units with the outline. But again, it will be on the basis of a firm municipal contribution that you'll know what that is and to be payable over from 25 to 29, so almost a 4 to 5 year period.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bedford. I'm going to go to CEO Willett, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe build off of what CEO Beckett shared is, listen, there'll be multiple decision points going through to this. I don't intend Andrew and his team and the sponsorship team to give you a drum roll release, in a year from now. One that will come sooner rather than later is the Aquatic Center. The Aquatic Center will be a decision likely this year on, do we want to invest in this? And that will be tied into a decision of moving forward generally with an idea of the Aquatic Center, with the Canada Games bid. I know Andrew, in his commitment to present today, was basically that same concept is we will continue to share information as it becomes available on it. And it will be important for our board to also share and clarify what you need in order for you and your own councils to be prepared for this decision as well. So please just be aware that there would be no scenario that Andrew or I would ever allow that, you know, all this information is coming to this board and you're going to be expected to vote on it here. You know, we would all acknowledge that your own respective councils and communities need to be embedded into this decision, and that process will be throughout this year. So, you know, that's not all been built out quite yet on what that looks like, but I can assure you that that would be part of the process.
Thank you, Mr. Villette. Next is Director Doucette, please.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Andrew, for a nice presentation. I'll be sharing that with council and stuff. I just had a quick question on the contribution from the municipalities when that comes around. Will it be do you think it would be based off of a formula of residents? You know what I'm saying?
For simplicity side, I suspect that we'd probably follow something along the lines of what the Fundy Region Service Commission's split in costing is. So, I think that's
simple.
That would be probably the way that we would suggest.
Yeah. And this is a very exciting thing. And like we say, we know the Aquatic Center needs, and it does, upgrading for sure. But combining with Moncton, I think, is a very, very smart move. And so we'll both get a benefit. And I think if we can make that work, I think that's the way to go. And I like their approach so far. So we'll be kept up to date, I'm sure. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Director Doucette. Next in queue is Director Riddell, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Andrew. A couple of questions. It says that the host municipality, which is our region, and I think Canada Games has been assigned to regions before, right? Niagara?
Absolutely, and we have clarified with them that they're comfortable with it being multiple. In fact, certainly from the province's standpoint, that's their preference, and I think the Canada Games Council quite liked the fact that it would be a region being part of it rather than just an isolated.
Yeah, because in 2021 they assigned it to the Niagara region.
That's right, exactly.
In order to balance the cost to individual taxpayers through property taxes to about 500,000 people.
Yeah, no, exactly.
In that region. But my first question was, we agree to give $3 million cash to the host society for capital expenditures. We then lose any control over that cash for those capital expenditures.
Yeah, we've clarified that through the process that it actually is $3 million that's contributed to the capital costs that are identified. The work will actually be done by the municipal units. The Canada Games group don't own any facilities, so they really don't have any authority to make capital expenditures. The expenditures would be done by the municipal units and then simply accounted for on a consolidated basis by the Canada Games host committee to make sure that commitment of the minimum $3 million capital contribution has been met.
Okay, and I sort of piggyback on what Director Merrifield said. I looked at the average cost of these games over the past couple of years, and they're basically between $35 and $55 million. And the host community or region, which would be us, contributes between $15 and $19 million. And I looked at the Niagara region, and their total cost was $98 million, and the deficit was $13 million after they contributed 13. So I'm concerned about your fiscal.
Where are those numbers coming from?
They came from the CAO of the Canada Games 2021 Canada Summer Games from the Niagara region.
Certainly our experience, and we've taken a look at Niagara's, we're following closely the experience in Newfoundland and each community's had its own sort of challenges associated with certain facilities that have been a shortfall on. But the burden to the host communities has not been in that order of magnitude, and certainly wasn't our experience when it was here at all.
Okay, yeah, because I just took that from the Canada Games capital project funding that was submitted to the region in Niagara, and that was a concern.
Yeah,
It was
the
a
capital.
deficit of 13 on top of the 3.
Yeah, and that's why the capital projects has always been the question mark in terms of regions, in terms of choosing how they wanted to proceed. As an example, if Moncton were to put in their own bid, they'd be faced with trying to come up with monies to satisfy the pool side of things, which would significantly outstrip a $3 million contribution that's there. Based on, and again, when I go back on, I'm actually less concerned at this stage in terms of the capital expenditures because we have done a preliminary review of all the facilities. Moncton's done the same thing. We really don't see significant costs associated with the facilities, except for what may come out of the review of the aquatic center. Moncton Stadium's in good shape. Our stadium's in good shape. Both probably need a new track by 2029, but that was going to have to be done anyway. There's ball fields that need a bit of work on them, but again, talking to the city and others, that these were planned anyway. So we're not seeing anything that's a cause for concern in terms of capital costs associated with the games.
Okay, and the other question I had was the ongoing maintenance of these facilities once the Canada Games is wrapped up. Your commitment is to the wrap-up, but there is also maintenance cost, like the aquatic center. We're still paying for the aquatic center.
That's right. But hopefully with the upgrades, it puts them in a better spot in terms of ongoing utilization of that facility, the competitions that are held there. But there's no question. I agree with you. Pools and rinks don't make money. I've got 25 years in municipal government to attest to the fact that pools and rinks don't make money, but they are significant assets to the benefit of the health and well-being of the community that come with a cost associated with them. But you're right, they don't make money.
And the other thing about your assessment of the economic impact of the games, I know that Alberta and Toronto, they're having great difficulties justifying the economic impact that's based on the taxpayers footing the bill for hosting the games. And I think one of the council members said
particularly
we're only
things like
benefiting the business in the form of corporate welfare, and taxpayers shouldn't have to pay more in taxes just so certain businesses can increase their profits. So I leave that comment.
Yeah, and I think the bigger centers was particularly around things like the Olympic Games that Toronto, Calgary, and others have backed away from bidding on those larger events. I can understand why in terms of the types of investments that are needed in them. The Canada Games is at a bit different level. It's amateur level. It's younger athletes. The expectations in terms of what's done with facilities are quite a bit less than what's associated with with those other major international events. And again, I think it's one of the benefits of the approach we're taking in terms of doing a joint bid. Capital expenditure wise, again, we're looking at we're trying to strip this down to make it as very minimal in terms of what capital investments need to be made.
Yeah, appreciate that. And I know that the benefits, once they're apparent to people out in the rural district, it may become apparent to them. But as far as 211 million coming in, I don't see it coming into the Fundy Rural District. So, and I see them paying for it.
It's fair. I mean, look, it's a bit of a mix from that standpoint. The overall benefit for the region is I would say the longer standing side is a tourism and promotion side of things, that it exposes the region to a broad cross section of people from across the country that hopefully we do see spillover impacts in terms of the tourism side of things.
Thank you, and hopefully we'll have some athletes from the Fundy Rural District who will greatly benefit from having them in their hometown region. I'm going to go now to Mayor Grant.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Andrew. And certainly I think we all see the benefits of the games, and the joint bid makes perfect sense. So I think that was an excellent move. My question is on the financial commitments page, and the one that I find a bit scary is that the host municipalities will agree to be responsible for any financial deficit associated with the games, capital and operating. And as you said, it's not so much the capital that concerns me. That's pretty well a set figure. We will know what that is, right? but this business of being responsible for any deficit on the operating side, I find makes me very nervous. Do we have any idea of the risk of that happening, and if it does happen, the risk of the level of deficit? Do we have any idea about those things?
Feedback we've received from the previous 3 host communities, and again, going back to our experience in 1985, is the operating side has not caused problems for the host municipalities outside of their initial commitment. The costs are reasonably easy to predict on this side of things. But look, a lot of this is going to come down to the credibility of the people that come forward to be part of the organization that's set up to host. We already have some local leads that have expressed an interest in this. I would say they're extremely reputable, extremely experienced, and extremely committed to making sure that these games are delivered in a financially responsible manner.
Thank you.
Thank you. And CEO Olet.
Yeah, just one point on this, and it's perhaps something that we work with Envision St. John over the coming weeks and months on this, is what type of financial oversight stewardship can the FRSC provide if that investment is coming and it's forthcoming? I suspect a part of the governance structure would be to say, what types of oversights are supported if there's an expectation of being responsible for a deficit. It'd certainly be important that the funds that are being invested by the municipalities are being overseen to ensure that doesn't happen. So that's all stuff. That's a great point, but that can all be dealt with through governance kind of oversight as part of the structure as we go forward, and kind of building that confidence to say, we know that something's up. We catch it really early. We take action. But that stewardship from the investor standpoint, I think that can be built in pretty nicely.
And like I said, that is part of the Canada Games process. There's a big binder that goes along with this. They've got a lot of history in terms of doing this. That's already that's part of their structure to make sure that accountability is there. Like I said, the local group has to be set up as a nonprofit corporation with audited regular audits of their operations, budgets that have to be prepared by them, but also brought forward to the funding body so that they know where things stand. So there'll be lots of opportunities for oversight.
Thank you very much. And certainly looking at their financial audits and so forth over the past and doing our homework helps. And I believe when the Francophone Games were considering this area, that was one of the things that was also noted, is that the host team or the host community would be responsible for the deficit so I don't think that's unusual, but certainly we don't want to be stuck with that. So thank you very much. And could I have a motion on receive and file, please? Moved by Director Bedford, seconded by Director Doucette. On the question, there are none. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you very much for being here, Mr. Duncan. Item 10B, presentations, community development research. Brenda, welcome. Brenda McCollum.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm here today to introduce the Human Development Council, and unfortunately, there was a timing piece, so we did lose one of our presenters, but we have a backup with Randy Hatfield here. But so just to give you a little bit of an introduction here, the Community Development Research Project, if you recall, we're taking this year to really dive into the data in the Fundy region, along with the assets, the current state of our services, identify the gaps, and explore the opportunities. And this is all with the lens of the mandate of community development. So affordable housing, social inclusion, newcomer services, diversity promotion, and healthy communities. The end goal that we're heading towards is to gather this information so we can structure the committee appropriately and determine the focus and the structure as we move forward over the next 5 years. Phil, could I get you at the next slide? So this is where we are right now in the project. We're at the very first piece, and this is basically looking at the data in front of us. What are our demographics across the region? I know you've all seen this in your communities before. You've looked at your stats, you know who lives in your communities. What we're asking you to do today is take a slightly different lens. This is within the Fundy region. And we've also for the first time, we've taken, the Human Development Council has taken the 2021 statistics and adapted it to your new boundaries. So Hampton, Fundy St. Martin's, Fundy Rural District, those new boundaries, we've taken those, the 2021 stats have been taken and adjusted to your new boundaries with your new population, et cetera. So you will see it under our current boundaries as well. From the data, then the next phases of the project, again, asset mapping to understand our current services, and then the needs assessment and engagement process. So again, just what does this mean in the Fundy region as Randy walks you through the data? What does it mean in our communities when we look at if we have an area of high senior concentration in one of our communities? And how does that apply to housing? How does that apply to, and we're going to see some of the stats from housing. And what does that mean in those communities? What does it mean if we have high areas of the family, when we look at family stats and lone parent families? And again, where they are across the region, and what does it mean for the region as a whole as we look at these stats? So with that, I'll introduce Randy and let him walk through it.
Thanks,
Welcome, Randy.
Madam Chair, directors. I was the understudy today. I was hoping you were going to hear from a younger staff member, Liam Fisher, who's from the Valley, educated in the States, has been with us for a year, and is scarily competent. Like many of the young people I'm working with now, I'm totally impressed, and it's really encouraging to be able to retain them, to keep them in the community, and have them use their skills and put their lens on what we're doing.
And could you repeat his name, please?
Yeah, Liam Fisher.
Thank you.
The untimely passing of his grandmother and the funeral, I mean, we didn't take into account that he was supposed to be here today, but so he's gone. So maybe I'll get to hear from him next time, and I hope he will be with us for a while. And as I said, he's, like most of the young people I'm working with now, quite clever. They say that demography is destiny. And if that's the case, we've got some things to look at as a region. If population and its cohorts of population is going to determine how we evolve, how we grow, then it's really important to understand the numbers and what we're dealing with. We've been able to, as Brenda said, to create some customized geographies of the entities that comprise the Regional Services Commission and squeeze the 2021 census through that. So the numbers that you'll see this morning and the ones that you have in your kits all relate to the 2021 census, but are grouped together by entities. But we've also put in comparative tables for a national rate, a provincial rate, a Services Commission rate, and then each of the 7 entities, which I think you'll find helpful. Oh, there's one of Liam's maps. This is where I wanted Liam. No, we've been able to create heat maps of the province using the Regional Services Commission's boundaries, the 12 boundaries, and we have a series of key indicators on the left-hand side, and they'll relate to to exactly what it says. The first one, for instance, is median after-tax income, and you can see the shading of the rates. By clicking on any of those entities or any of those areas, you'll find that we'll have a pop-up sheet that will talk about where you are. In this case, it's Grand Bay Westfield, population based upon the census, the median after-tax household income, the New Brunswick median after-tax income, and Canada. So it's a neat way of sort of comparing where that entity sits in relation to higher levels of geography, either the region itself or the province or the country. And those rates or those schedules on the left go from low income status, renter households. Renter households, for instance, is an interesting one, Brandy, if you can sort of click on that. About 75% of homeowners in New Brunswick own their house, which is a high number nationally, but when you consider the rural nature of the province, you don't have a lot of high-rise apartments in rural areas. So of course, we're going to have more homeowners than renters, but within the FRC, you'll see profound differences in the numbers of renters compared to owners. In St. John, for instance, if we were to click on that dark blue section at the bottom, poof, up will come records that talk about renter households account for 45.8% of households. And we could compare that with any other of the entities, in this case, Hampton, where it's 11.1%. So that sort of heat map and that online dashboard that we can make available to you is a fun thing to play with when the hockey game's over. You know, you can sort of take a look and see where you rank, where you fit, what the particular issues are. And then the next step, of course, is really, well, what does that mean? So what? But if we are talking about housing, and core housing need, of course, is a huge file that we're all desperately interested in. I don't think there's an entity in the FRC that doesn't have affordable housing as an issue. The manifestation of that need is different according to entities. But let's go back, I guess, and quickly look at a slide that just talks about basic numbers. Population and population density. Rosse is the densest, by population, entity within the FRC. And the rural district, of course, is just the opposite. Well, that has huge implications for service delivery, transportation networks, where you want to place resources and assets. But it's important to sort of intersect that understanding of density and population with sort of the next slide, which gives you the age profiles. Quispamsis has the greatest percentage of 0 to 14 residents within the FRC. The Fundy Rural District, about 23%, has the highest number of seniors in the FRC. But when you think about it, does that ever have an important piece to play in housing? We know this week from Stat Canada that seniors in housing, there's a stickiness there. Seniors in the country are now reluctant to convey or sell their property and downsize because of the concern of where could they go. So all of a sudden, seniors' homes that may have been 2 or 3 bedroom at one time and are no longer being used by them for that size, they're not getting into the market. They're not getting available for families because seniors are worried about where they would go if they did sell their house. So there are a lot of pieces that we can think about when we start talking about housing within the Regional Services Commission, and in particular how it relates to the entities. That's the age distribution. Oh, and I got it all right too. Exactly talking about 0 to 14. And that, of course, has, I mean, that's just math, right? If you're between 0 and 14, then within 5 years, you can sort of predict the number of folks that will be entering early learning centers, starting elementary schools, the number of people that will be aging out of high school, and where do they go for post-secondary opportunities. And similarly, you can see that's not an unusual trajectory or trend line when it comes to age distribution. The boomers take up the biggest portion right there. And then there are the Xers, and then there's the millennials, and then there's the Zs, and there's a new one. I don't know if you've ever heard. The next one is the alphas. Anybody born since 2013 is an alpha. That's the next generation. So the greatest one was those who fought in the war and the Depression, and then the boomers, but the alphas is the next one. So age is important. Brenda touched on family composition. Stats Canada reported just this week that the lowest income cohort in the country is lone parent families headed by an immigrant. And when you unpack that, you can sort of figure that out. Because when we look at poverty, we use an income measure. If you're a one-parent family, you've got one income earner. If you apply a gender lens to that, 80% of lone parent families are female-led. Female labor force attachment is challenged by transportation, by childcare, by all sorts of factors. So we also want to, when we look at this data, use lenses. Use a low-income lens, use a gender lens. And that, I think, will help inform the way we want to go with programs. But if you were to look at the distribution of lone parent families, that's median income. Just, I don't know if it's necessary to actually see how that's all spread out. It's in there.
That
it's
would
in
have
your
been
kit.
in the in the other, not within the presentation
Right,
here.
okay.
So it was in
But
the-
that is an important cohort. Household income, I think, median household income after tax is a relevant consideration within the region and certainly within St. John. You want to find blue. You really want to be where the blue is. But you can see the distribution throughout the FRC of where the median after-tax incomes of some relevance are. And where the areas, you don't want to necessarily be in a red area because that indicates a low after-tax median income. So I think spreading that out is instructive when we look at the region. And you guys have an incredible mission ahead of you. It's the boldest thing since equal opportunity. It's this whole, and this whole social inclusion file, that's a very elastic term. What that really means and how that manifests itself to you is going to be, I think, one of your principal challenges, other than municipal finance reform. So there's a lot on your plate. But core housing need is an indicator used by CMHC. It takes into account adequacy, suitability, and affordability. So you can see the housing challenge that exists within the area and the way it manifests itself in the different entities that make up the region. The next one just puts on a heat map the core housing need distribution as defined by the CMHC in Stats Canada. And these are things that you want to take some time with on your own. It's not helpful for me to sort of read stats, but it is interesting, I think, to sort of see what we're able to do with the kind of GIS mapping that Liam has brought to our shop and that we're happy to sort of bring to other parts of the province.
Randy, if I could just, and the other piece that Liam was going to speak about here is what is core housing? What is core housing need, the definition of
Right.
core housing?
That goes to, as I said, adequacy. Is there mold? What's the condition of it like? Suitability. Is it appropriate for the size of the family? And affordability. If you're spending more than 30% of your income on housing, you're considered to be in core housing need. That's the rough indicator that Stats Canada puts on it. We're participating in the upcoming MB Power rate hearings, and we're looking at income and affordability of energy through a low income lens, and we're looking at what it's reasonable to expect a family to spend on electricity out of its after-tax income. So these kinds of data points are important to understand and to see where they are. The spatial distribution of vulnerability and marginalization within the Regional Services Commission, I think, is perhaps intuitively understood by most of us, where the areas of high income are, where the pockets of low income may be. But I think it's very powerful to see it on a map or to have the numbers in a chart where you can actually put some data behind the intuition that we have in this area. The renter household distribution that I touched on earlier is very important. And you can see the red is the densest area, the area where you have a higher prevalence of renters as opposed to owners. There was a time when renting was a proxy measure for social cohesion within a community. And the theory was that if you owned your home, you were more invested in it, you paid your taxes there, but that's where your principal asset were appreciated. And there was thought to be more cohesive communities where there was home ownership. I think with the growth of high-end market rental units within the region that we're seeing now, we can probably challenge that earlier assumption. But the type of market housing that's available and the type of rental market housing that's available certainly is something that has to be considered when we look at the growth of apartments in the region. The cranes that we see in our communities are for high-end market rents. We don't see a lot of construction of affordable housing. And that's going to be a challenge for you folks and the province as we deal with this. Though a reminder that this is the 2021 census, and people often say, well, that was 3 years ago. That's pretty stale. What does that got to do with anything that's here right now? And I acknowledge that and accept that, but it's a constraint that we all face. There just isn't fresher data. We know that our population has exploded in the last 3 years. So if we're looking at 2021 data, we're going to have to understand that some variables within that census product we're going to have to massage. And some elements within that census data are reported on annually that we're happy to provide you updates with. Median after-tax income, for instance, it's not stagnant. We can probably get through CRA some figures. So we can freshen up certain pieces of this data, but some of it we're just stuck with. Some of it, the census is the mother lode. That's the denominator. The N is everybody. It's not sample-based. It's a very rich understanding of what's happening in our communities, but it does get dated. As some of you know, I could go on. I probably won't because I think I'm standing between you at lunch. But we did want to take an opportunity to introduce that data that will inform the next steps that Brenda talked about. Next is an asset mapping to take into account what's out there in communities to provide services, who needs the services, and then the next big, the real, I think, challenge for the group will be a needs assessment. And actually convening civil society, doing some focus groups, engaging the lived experience, and try to get an understanding of what we need.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Hatfield.
Yeah.
Certainly and appreciate it. Presentation, and Brenda, thank you very much. And as far as the 2021 data census is concerned, we have to start somewhere, and that's our ground level, and we all are very much aware that our populations increase year over year, so certainly that's always taken into consideration as well, but we work with what we have. So I'm going to go to Director Riddell, please.
Just a question on your density, population density. You have funded rural district as 5. What is that? 5 per square mile, 5 per acre?
Per square kilometer.
Per square kilometer.
Number of people per square kilometer.
Okay.
I think your kits would have these. I just printed off black and white, but if you have it in color, you see the population thing deals with age profiles. I mean, Stats Canada now counts the people over 85. It used to be just 65, but now they're actually, given all of us aging, having the new one. But population is covered there. Language is interesting. I mean, I remember years ago being told it's the second most prevalent language in Halifax was Arabic. I thought, really? So what we've done for language profiles is we've indicated the most prominent one within the region, French and English, and then the next most prominent language, which I think is kind of interesting when you look and you consider, whether it's Spanish or Arabic, which happens to be the case in many of them. Mandarin in Quispamsis, for instance, is the third most popular language. I think that's kind of...
And sorry, just to your the data point, the extra piece, they do not have them in the kit, but we can send those out to you. Yes.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for being here today, and we look forward to future presentations on community development for our region. Thanks very kindly.
Thanks.
Item 10C, procedural bylaw, and we have Graham with us this morning. Welcome, Graham. Thank you for your patience and your waiting, and we always save the best for last, but we won't tell Brenda and Randy that.
I was going to say that, but yeah, thank you, Brenda. We can move to the next slide already. Skip the introductions. Thank you, Chair. As I'm sure all of us are familiar, we've embarked on a very ambitious road to revise the procedural bylaws of the FRSC, including our first ever code of conduct, which is quite an exciting piece of work for us as a commission, and I think has really set us on the right path moving forward. So based on our previous meeting motion to adopt the new revised procedural bylaws, it also included a request that staff look at alternative options for consideration when it comes to section 4.5.1, which deals with the election of officers. So this morning we're presenting 3 options for you that respond to that feedback from the past meeting, look at the status quo, look at a potential third option that we've devised, which we find quite potentially innovative. Garner the feedback, and you'll see in your kit, we're looking today for the direction from the board so that we can take that feedback, reword it to formally fit within the procedural bylaw, get the legal counsel to review and make sure that we abide by the Regional Service Delivery Act and all the necessary legislation so that this is the proper move going forward, but is chosen by the board for the executive. So I'm going to go through a few slides that have some of the key aspects of those 3 options as well as some considerations before discussion. So option A is a fixed rotation, and this would basically put every member entity of the FRSC in a fixed rotation, which 1 through 7, we go through it. We'd have a transitional year in 2024. Of course, understanding that we have a present chair and we need to make sure that that establishes continuity. This is a model that is not often seen in local governance. We've heard examples from the board in the past about regional facilities looking at it this way. Research staff has shown this is a practice that exists, for example, in international treaties, like the Trans-Pacific Partnership rotates its chair through different members, which in that case are international or national governments, I should say, rather than individual member communities. But essentially, it just moves through. You have dispensaries, which is a past chair that's established, again, ahead of time, an immediate future chair, and we go through that rotation every year. The chair moves forward. There's a certain amount of continuity, although I should point out, as we'll talk about in consideration, continuity is not assured in this method because, as we all know, local government elections do happen. There could be a break in that continuity of an individual, even though the membership is reflected in, for example, a past chair. This schedule would be predetermined. It would be transparent. It would be open to everyone in the region to understand. And it has a certain amount of flexibility built in where obviously we cannot force the chair position on anyone. So there is the option to abstain from whether it's by choice of the member entity itself, the individual representative, to abstain from that role. However, that would mean that just as a queue in the supermarket, you would be bumped to the back of the line, so to speak, and then move forward as time goes. So it could put quite a gap in time between when a member entity is represented in the chair role. If we go to option B, which I'm sure we're all very familiar with, it's status quo. It's annual elections for the officer positions. This offers a great deal of flexibility, reflects a lot of best practices when it comes to, for example, as far as I can tell, every RSC in the province, as well as many other local government entities across the country. It provides the opportunity to elect on an annual basis. And I should say, and this applies for all of these options, the Regional Service Delivery Act does directly say that the board shall elect from amongst its members a officer and a chairperson. It should be pointed out that election means, in a lot of contexts, many different things. We have ways of electing, for example, a Speaker of the House in the House of Commons that is done by preferential ballot, not by simple yeas or nays. It could be a ballot. It could be an open nominating committee. It could be nominations from the floor. These are all valid forms of election for a body such as this. So that's something to keep in mind, is that by keeping the status quo as an annual election, it still gives the FRSC some leeway in how it determines those positions in any given year. You could have a policy decision, or you could have a standard or procedure that is adopted as a motion perhaps that is not written into the procedural bylaw, but is something that consent amongst board members is that we'll continue with this. And that could apply to the rotation as well. We don't necessarily have to write that into the procedural bylaw. It could be simply a tacit agreement amongst the board as well that there will be this equity and rotation of representation within the executive committee. The third option that we came up with, because we were looking at different ways of structuring the rotation, where there could be perhaps greater equity between members, that someone precluding themselves or abstaining from the chair role wouldn't completely remove them from the executive, for example. So this would be the idea of rotating rosters. And I'll try to visualize how this might work for you. We would essentially establish groupings or rosters of 3, which would again be set out ahead of time, which would each serve as the executive for 2 consecutive years. So you've got 3 people filling 2 annual executive roles. And what this means is that you've got a small group designated as the executive, and amongst those 3, you elect a chair and a vice chair. And on the second year, potentially the past chair or the depository is immediately sort of understood, but it could mean that in moments when governance is going well, you could have the decision that the same chair repeats 2 years in a row. And you've got a little bit of continuity in that same way. Still has the predictability of a rotating roster, that transparency with everyone understanding when in the order everyone comes about, but it is a little more fixed in terms of not only who's a part of that, but also that, let's say it's our current chair, could be continuing on for a second year if they were in that rotation still, or could move to someone else, or if the choice was there to simply want to be part of the executive committee, but not be the chair of the FRSC, that would also be possible in this model, which is something that is difficult to accommodate within a purely 1-1-1 fixed rotation model. So just to summarize a little bit before we get to discussion, I have a couple slides of some considerations. You'll see that there is a certain amount of equity and shared leadership to those 2 rotating options, as I've labeled them A and C. Again, it's that predictability, transparency with the citizens of and everyone involved in the region for understanding when the time comes for that leadership. However, there are some risks inherent in that. It means that there could be gaps in a long period of time that, let's say Quispamsis, where we are today, might have a very long gap between representation as the chair. Annual election doesn't have that built-in mechanism, but it does provide flexibility for everyone involved. We're all familiar with it. We know how that process works. We know how it can foster good continuation of governance as well. The complexity of administration feeds into that. Options A and C are fraught with complexities. Inserting them into the procedural bylaws is not often seen as a recommended best practice. Even in my international treaty example, that's not something that is part of the treaty. It's something that all the member parties agreed as a decision of the entity after the fact to follow moving forward. And the continuity issue, there's continuity issues in all of these. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that no matter what option we choose, and there's always a risk inherent in not having a continued representation. It could be a change of individuals due to personal reasons or local government elections. It could be due to the model that we've adopted that breaks that continuity. It could mean that there's simply a change in the chair due to decisions of future motion made by the board, and that's something that we just have to understand as we make these decisions. And then finally, I mentioned predictability and planning. There is an advantage perhaps to the rotating model where we see the future laid out in front of us. It would be written into a table. We would see 4 years from now is when Rosse takes the chair position. So there's a certain amount of planning and foresight that can go into that. However, at the same time, it can provide some unpredictability still. No system is perfect, and chasing perfection in this might be to our detriment. I don't think we really need to explain the representation aspect because that was basically inherent in the idea of rotating options. However, as mentioned, there are some risks where we might see long gaps in representation if, let's say, into year 3 of a municipal term, a representative on the FRSC board abstains from taking that chair position. In option A, it would be 7 years before that entity appears again, and a future representative after another election might wonder, why haven't we had a chance to serve in this role for the last 6 or 7 years? I've been here for X amount of time. I'm sure you can picture how that discussion would go. And that goes same for the flexibility and adaptability. And that's where I would go back to the idea that there is every opportunity for the board to maintain the wording in the procedural bylaws that the FRSC has had for many years, including proposed in the revised bylaw, that we have an annual election. But it still would be an option for the board to have a decision amongst yourselves of how that proceeds. You could say, things are going extremely well. I would love to see a continuation of this chairperson or this executive committee. Let's keep it as is. Or we could have that same agreement I mentioned where we have a standard directive or a standard policy in place that suggests that we do this, but we don't have to write that into the procedural bylaws. And as I stated at the beginning, this is something that we've looked at through best practice research from discussion within staff, but any final version of this that would go up for adoption in a future motion into the procedural bylaws would be discussed and vetted with. We've reached out to ELG already, but also with our own legal counsel to make sure that it meets all the requirements of the various acts in which the commission falls. So those are the three options we've devised for you today. I think that the motion's very clear from our past meeting that we're here to take that feedback on a decision, and we will come back with that formalized part of section 4.5 or any subsections required to make these possible and put them up for adoption at a future meeting.
Thank you very much. Phil, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to first thank Graham for all this work. Just to let you know, no other Regional Service Commission is thinking about this. And I think that's okay. That's great. This is something we want to talk about. I think that's great. So as you also note, we're not really making a recommendation because we really want to provide you the opportunity to give us guidance on this. For us, what is known is what we have before. Going into the unknown is a scary prospect because we can't work through every detail of that. But what I think Graham has provided as a summary is we heard that equity is a big issue. So we've provided two new examples that we believe has integrated the equity piece. One of them tried to integrate this other kind of democratic process within it as well. The last point that Graham made, I think, is a really important one. And I'll maybe frame it in a shorter period of time. Oh, I hope so. If I take too long, please yell at me. But the idea is that whatever we come up with, it basically can be thrown out by one member saying, I just want to vote. So we can instill anything in our bylaws to say, this shall be the case. Every 7 years, Quis shall be chair. If on that year that Quis is supposed to be chair and somebody from Hampton says, I want to do it, we can't prevent a vote. Our legislation says that there needs to be a vote that happens every year. So we can certainly commit today and say, this is what we want, this is what we like. But what and we're getting this confirmed by legal and everything, but most likely what's going to happen here is that it can be changed by any one individual or one member when it is presented to the board. And that's just the what's entrenched by the province is the requirement of a vote every year for these roles. So we can't stop that. We can't work around that. So the way I see this is sort of a convention that we agree to, and it could set a standard. So if this is the right thing, you could establish it when the next election happens in 2026. Let's say you all come back, you will uphold that and say, I remember that, we did that, and we're going to continue on. If you're all replaced and there's a whole brand new board, we'll remind them of it and they'll say, that's the old school way. And they'll come back and say, we want to do it differently. But you can still establish a convention. I don't want to diminish the importance of this because of this fact that you could eliminate it. There are groups that can do this by convention and it can uphold for a long period of time. So that's the only added piece I wanted to share. It's up to you. We're definitely all ears. We are not going to adopt this today. We didn't want to draft all the terminology of this at this stage. We want to get your feedback, collect it, and we do want to get this done by April because we do foresee an election in May. We want to make sure that everybody knows what's going on in May by the time that time comes around. So important discussion today.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Graham. I'll throw my 2 cents worth in. I know in the past there was a chair that was in place, and Director Grant can correct me on this, but for 4 years. And I don't feel that that's a good representation of the entire region. So I would certainly be cautious about having somebody repeating year after year after year. 2 years I'm okay with, as I read in the document, but to have somebody there for 4 years, I really feel that there's an ownership there that shouldn't exist. So I'm going to go now to next in queue, Director Merrifield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to build on your point, to have someone there year after year through an election process, that could actually happen. There's a bigger risk that way than there is through either option A or C. And I see values to both A and C in terms of how they fulfill that commitment to equity across the region. I like that shared leadership continuity. It's fair and transparent. And it removes the politics out of it, which I think is really, really important. I do have a question about option C with the terms. I'm just concerned about the how that would work from a continuity perspective, because 24, 25, and I'm fine with 2-year terms because I think that you build that knowledge during and that collaboration during that period of time. But then it switches out to an entirely new group of people. As opposed to having staggered terms. And I know that makes it more complex, but did you consider that when you were developing this model? Thank you.
Certainly, through the chair, I think that was one of the main considerations we had, was how do we provide, especially in that, attempting to innovate in that hybrid model, how do we have that continuity? That's something that we heard from the board in feedback, and I think that it's quite a challenge to find the right mechanism to do that. And I think that certainly from my perspective, it's really a call, maybe not to action for the FRSC, but for the Commission, that governance means a lot more than just that continuity piece. And I think that having the precedent of regular regional meetings, having people brought up to speed, having good contributions from the CEO, who's an ex officio member, providing continuity, providing good communication between staff and documentation, that makes it easier for any incoming officer to understand what's going on. And I think that that should be a lesson across any model that we adopt, is that there's strength in a board that functions to the benefit of its staff and its leadership, giving what they need and providing that. But certainly there's the option. The challenge has always been, as I mentioned, there's going to be continuity issues no matter what. If we inserted a past chair that continues from the previous roster, there's no guarantee, for example, when we switch into 2026, that it could be a different individual, and then it's not quite the same, and it's incumbent then on the Commission staff or the own members' entity staff to make sure that that individual is brought up to speed with what they need. And there's always going to be some potential scenario. So we have, just as any sort of risk analysis, the opportunity to say, what's the lowest risk that we're willing to accept, and move on from there.
I was thinking that potentially developing a robust onboarding process for the new group in option C might help mitigate that from a continuity perspective. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Next is Director Riddell, please.
Thank you, Graham. Whatever happens, I'd like to see differentiation between your terminology. You're talking about step down and you're talking about abstain. And abstain means I do not wish to do it, and you get back of the line. Step down means halfway through, it's too much work for me, I'm stepping down. They're two different concepts. I think any of the wording should allow for both of those and make it clear.
Thank you.
Phil, please.
Yeah, just one scenario piece here that's important, and it relates to Director Riddell's comment, is that you can have a member of the board who would like to be part of the executive but not the chair. So you could have a member who says, I'm interested in being the executive, but I hear about all these checks and these random phone calls from the CEO, and I'm out. I'd rather just be a vice chair. And for option one, that would cause some adjustment needed. I don't think it's impossible, but it would not allow for this sequence of we would appoint a vice chair who would become the chair. It would be a vice chair for a 3-year term without being chair. And we'd have to figure out who would be the chair, and there could be a scenario there that a chair becomes a chair for 2 years in that scenario. So all these this is new to us. So we'd have to come up with these scenarios and just accept that as we navigate this, we just do the best that we possibly could to uphold it and respect that, there's going to be scenarios. There could be somebody who says, I don't want to do this anymore. And what would we do in that scenario? We'd say, okay, we'll have to work through. We would commit to you as staff to come back and give you what we think is the best resolution while upholding the principle of whatever approach we take.
Thank you. Next in queue is Director Grant.
So I am not in favor of option A, the fixed rotation, for a number of reasons. I think, as you said, someone may not wish to do that. You've made some provisions for that, but the other part of it is, and I think Phil has mentioned it, if we get a group of new people who are not experienced, and that adds to the stress of the person who should be coming up. And also, I think, would be an issue for our administration and our CEO. So I'm certainly not in favor of that option. I'm in favor of continuing the election process, but option C, the rotating roster, I think would certainly be more acceptable to me than option A, which I think is just completely unacceptable. So my vote would be for the status quo, or I guess to a lesser degree, the rotating roster.
Thank you, Director Grant. Are there any other comments, questions? Director Riddell.
I just have one comment with the resolution is staff is going to come back with something based on the feedback. And when they do come back, perhaps they could look at the map on the procedural bylaws, because it basically deprives the Fundy Rural District of Mispec, LSD of Rossay, and Upper Golden Grove.
Thank you, Director Riddell. Director Doucette, please.
Thank you, Chair. Basically, my take on this is no matter what we decide on, I think there needs to be an opt-out situation for the person that's, like we talked about before, that be next expected to take it. That would be the only thing, because and the other concern is having some experienced people on this board when you might have change, right? So I think my main thing is, if it came to Hampton and it wasn't me and somebody else, they might not want to take that on their first term even, or something like that. But the option would be for them to turn it down. Correct? Is that what we're thinking? Yeah. So I think that's completely fair that way. You don't want to be expected and made to do that, because we're all very busy, and this, reform has put so much on our plates. We just need to understand everybody has complicated situations in their own community. And sometimes with either health or family or whatever it is, they just have enough to do. So they might not want to take this on. So that option needs to be there, I think. Excuse me. Thank you.
Thank you. And Director Bedford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess besides Nancy and I, we've probably been on this board longest than anybody else. We've seen a lot of new faces. And I like the status quo, with the exception of I do like a 2-year term. And one of the reasons why I do like the election is because if we do have a whole bunch of new people come in, which is inevitable, that will happen, the members actually get to know that the people that are there and base their vote on the experience of those people. And we've been very fortunate over the years that the chair has always been available, because the chairperson does take a lot of time signing checks and other things on the executive. So it takes a lot of time. But my personal opinion is I do like the election, that the board picks the chairperson and based on their knowledge and their experience. So that's how I would vote if it came to a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bedford. Are there any other questions, comments, concerns? I don't see any. So could I have a motion to receive and file, please? Moved by Director Riddell, seconded by Director Doucette. On the question, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'd also like to go back, the information that we received on community development research, that was not just for information purposes. Could I have a motion on that, please, to receive and file? That was one that Brenda and Randy just presented. Moved by Director Bedford, seconded by Director Grant. On the question, all those in favor? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. We will go down to, pardon me?
2 items from close.
Yes. We're bringing forward 2 items from close. One was the inflationary increase. So do you have a statement on that?
I'll read it out, and this is consistent with the limitations that are identified in the report, including that it does not relate to employees with separate employment contracts, as well as employees that have been hired full-time in 2024, which is to authorize CEO Ouellette to adjust management staff salaries to reflect the inflationary increase of 4.25 for 2024, retroactive January 1st, 2024.
May I have a mover on that, please? Moved by Director Riddell, seconded by Director Grant. On the question, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. The second one was the appointment of Cindy Rudaway to the RFC as of March 28th, 2024 until February 20th, 2025 as the admin rep from the FRD. May I have a motion to move that, please? Moved by Director Merrifield, seconded by Director Doucette. On the question, seeing there are none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. And we're looking for an adjournment, please. Moved by Director Riddell. All those in favor? Motion carried unanimously. Enjoy the rest of your week, everyone. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Cassie, Graham, Brenda. And happy Easter, yes.
You obviously go along.
We've heard Randy talk. Have a little bit more fruit before he gets taken away. It's so good. Fresh fruit, so nice. Oh, I know. No, I love fresh fruit.
She was so smart putting these all in. This is a plane. That's plain. That is plain.